Yeah, you're right. We've talked about that it may get a lot worse because if people are unrepentant, well, then what does God say? He says, I'm going to bring the judgment 7 times more. Leviticus 26, people can read that, and you can already see how he lays out the judgments in Deuteronomy 28. So you're exactly right. There's a certain amount of mercy within the midst of God's judgment. It's always like that because he's continually calling his people to repentance. And so I appreciate you bringing it up. Okay, so this stuff's really bad for you. It does all kinds of stuff. It can replicate, from what I understand, it can self-replicate. It can build things within your body, this graphene oxide, and cause all kinds of damage and problems for your body. So the question is, how do we get rid of it? So, Dr. Roth, what's the formula that you have here for getting rid of this stuff?
Well, it's something that I did a lot of research on, and what's very interesting is if you look at the history of graphene oxide. Initially, the industrial uses were for detox, and I don't mean that within the body. It was actually graphene oxide is a very strong heavy metal chelator or detoxifier, and one of the first things that it was used for was to remove heavy metals from aqueous solutions like wastewater. So just the fact that they use graphene oxide for that purpose shows that it does have a way of binding to heavy metals and removing them from wherever it is. Now, the body's an aqueous solution, so it kind of follows that if graphene oxide is in the body, that it's going to bind to heavy metals. The problem is, how do you remove it? It's binding to heavy metals, and it creates a lot of havoc in the body. There's so many. It actually mimics a lot of what's going on in the COVID symptoms just from graphene. In fact, there's a lot of speculation, research that's come out that says it may not necessarily be the spike protein itself. It may be the graphene oxide, which is producing most of the symptoms that people are seeing. Now, here's the kicker. When you functionalize graphene oxide with something called EDTA, I'm not sure if you've heard that term before.
I haven't.
It's a substance that it binds to. It's actually ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid. That's a very big word. It's a compound that medical doctors have been using in IV chelation for lead removal. What they found out was that it actually binds to heavy metals, chelates them out of the body. It actually removes calcium deposits from arteries too. There's many, many applications of this. But going back to the graphene oxide, what they do is they functionalize or bind EDTA to graphene oxide, and it makes the chelating of heavy metals much, much stronger. So it follows that if you have graphene oxide in the body and you have some way of getting EDTA into the body through whatever means, IV chelation. I'll go through some of those too because there's pluses and minuses. There's pros and cons with those. But if you get it into the body, it binds to, then it becomes carbon heavy and the body actually seeks to remove it. One of the amazing things about EDTA, well, first of all, graphene oxide has a Dalton size. Dalton size refers to the actual size of the compound or the molecule. Anything under 400, 500, let's say 500 Daltons will be able to cross the blood-brain barrier. That's a protective barrier in the brain. Why? It begs the question: why would they want something to cross a protective barrier that God put in there to prevent injury to the brain? So graphene oxide does it. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. And it goes back to what we were just talking about. It's possible that they're using graphene oxide to deliver chemicals, vaccine ingredients through the blood-brain barrier into the brain for the purpose of control. The neat thing about EDTA, which is remarkable, is that it actually has a Dalton size of under 300. So it also will cross the blood-brain barrier. So say you have graphene oxide in the brain doing its damage, doing its control. EDTA can actually cross that barrier, bind to the graphene oxide, and then help to remove it from the body. So this is something that hasn't really been explored in depth. And there are a lot of healthcare providers, I've talked to many of them, who felt like the vaccine contents could not be removed from the body. And what you'll see is a lot of protocols online in talk shows that they're very similar. And they use a lot of the same kind of compounds and supplements to remove these things, but nobody is addressing the graphene oxide specifically using EDTA. And I've spoken to, if you want to interrupt me at any time, just go ahead because I know I'm rambling on here. But I've talked to biochemists and the EDTA, they're familiar with it, and they do believe that it can remove not just degrade graphene oxide, but it can actually remove it completely from the body given enough time.
Well, let me ask you this, Michael. If you put this stuff in this EDTA, if you put this stuff in the body, and it goes up into the brain, it binds with the graphene oxide. Have you actually seen it remove it? I mean, how would you tell that it's been removed? Do you do that through X-rays, or do you do it through blood tests? What are you doing to verify that it actually has done what you're saying it's doing?
I'm actually trying to work with some scientists now. I've reached out to different labs, and we're hoping to do some challenge studies and some practical studies. But if you combine all the information that we have on graphene oxide, on heavy metals, how it works in the body, it just kind of follows theoretically that that's how it would work. But the biggest thing is you start using EDTA, and the best form, in my opinion, is in a transdermal cream. I actually was helpful in developing a very unique transdermal cream that actually goes through the pores of the skin, gets into the bloodstream, and helps to remove. The other forms are IV chelation, which is expensive and it's very aggressive. Suppositories, which don't get absorbed that well, and people really don't like to use that form of chelation. And oral, which is broken down very quickly in the stomach acids. So a topical cream is something that we developed. It's gentle, it's effective. But to answer your question, it's more of a clinical diagnosis. So if somebody comes in and they're having a lot of symptoms, the only thing that changes is putting them on a topical EDTA cream. Let's say you give them 2 or 3 months, those symptoms start improving drastically. That's the biggest indicator that it's doing what it's supposed to do.
Okay.
And that's the case with a lot of different medications, a lot of different treatments, supplements, and that kind of thing. It comes down to a clinical diagnosis and then a treatment regimen based on symptomology and how much it improves.
Okay. Something is just kind of going through